Ball pythons are probably the most popular pet snake that you could possibly own, and there's a million reasons why you'd want one, but there's three main reasons why they're not beginner pet snakes. My name's Adam, this is a banana ball python, you're watching Wickens Wicked Reptiles, stick around. Total transparency, there's actually more reasons why you'd want to get a ball python than why you wouldn't, but last week I did a video about beginner reptiles, the top 5, and ball pythons were not on there, so I just want to address why. And by the way, this is one of the babies. You might have seen him in a video a couple months ago. This guy's eating well and he's ready to go to a new home pretty soon. They'll be on the website, no need to message me. Let's just get right into it. Number 3. Size. Now this might seem ridiculous to some of you who have had species of pythons that are bigger or snakes that are bigger, but it is a real concern, in my opinion a valid one, just simply because a lot of people think that a snake that gets to 4 to 5 feet, like a ball python, is too big. And I don't think that they're wrong. I don't agree with them. I don't think that that's too big, of course, but if you give someone who's uninitiated a full-size ball python, which I was hoping to have around my neck in this video, but all of them are locked up, so more babies coming, I guess. This is a baby. This is about 2 months old, something like that. When they get to, say, 3 years old or 4 years old, whenever they top out at full maturity, females especially are going to get maybe 5 feet. And there are some people who say up to 6 feet, so regardless, even if it's 5 feet, they do get rather girthy, and although they're not dangerous, they definitely can look dangerous. Like if you gave this to somebody who had no idea what they were doing and never seen one before, they'd probably think, holy cow, that's a big snake. Because it kind of is. It kind of is a big snake. I know for you and I, people who have had snakes forever in different species and all that, it might not be a big thing, but I think we're beating a dead horse here.
There he is, beating that dead horse. Get him!
And these snakes can actually be pretty strong, especially for, say, a child or a small person. And I'm a pretty small dude, but I'm talking about like if you're a dainty 14-year-old boy, I don't know, then you might have an issue kind of wrangling this thing if it gets like around your chair, around a table leg. Like this happens to me all the time when I film like this cool B-roll stuff. And it might be just hard to wrangle them away. So not a dangerous thing, just kind of like a pain in the butt type thing. Whereas with a corn snake, you'll have no problem unwrapping a corn snake from basically anything. So just more of an inconvenience. But the main point that I wanted to get to is that, well, their enclosure is going to be rather large because it's a rather large snake, rather large species, right? And I know people will say, oh, well, you can keep them in a 40-gallon. No, you can't. I totally disagree with this. And if you're doing this, okay, well, maybe it's not totally wrong. I just would never suggest this. What I suggest, in my opinion, something that 75 gallons bare minimum, but I would much rather see you have, say, a full-size female and something like what's behind me, these enclosures here. Because a 4 foot by 2 foot by 2 foot allows this snake to always, if it can't stretch out completely, it's like the last few inches of its body that it can't stretch out if it goes diagonal or around one of the sides. And for sure, 1 and 2 sides, so like the length and the width, they can spread out, they can stretch out completely. And I think that I wouldn't consider them semi-arboreal, but there is new evidence saying that ball pythons do enjoy a little bit of height. And I've seen it myself. I've seen Pikachu, my albino male, up on this little perch thing that I gave him. So yeah, I think that definitely give them a little bit more height. If you can, if you want to keep them in tubs, as long as they're big enough and they're kind of taken care of properly and they have the right parameters, all the power to you. I don't think there's anything wrong with that either. And they're a bit intimidating, which I think was part of like the dead horse beating.
We would never hurt you.
But mostly enclosure size. Do you have 8 square feet of room for one of these guys when it grows up? Number 2, care requirements. Now, I personally don't think that the care requirements for ball pythons are that difficult, but if I were to give the option to a new person, hey, you can either have a corn snake or you can have a ball python, I personally think that a corn snake is easier to take care of for a few reasons. Ball pythons, they get bigger, of course, so they need a bigger enclosure. The bigger the enclosure, the harder it is to regulate the temperature and humidity. And also, the humidity level is just easier and more like your home, for most of us anyway, for a corn snake. Where with the ball python, it's going to need to be more humid, and that might be a problem for some people, especially if you live in, say, a colder climate where your furnace is sucking out the humidity all the time. Now, I don't run into this issue, even though I do live in Canada, it gets cold, and I have a furnace going all the time in the winter. I have a whole room, and I regulate the temperature and humidity for the entire room rather than just each individual. I regulate each individual enclosure as well, but this room I can regulate the humidity so I don't have to do extra work, basically. And what I mean by this is the heat is a little bit hotter than might be attainable for some people that live in a super cool climate. We're talking about basking spot of like low 90s. So not super big issue, but the humidity thing. Let's suppose that you live in Arizona and your humidity outside is like 30%. These guys in their enclosure need to be at 50 to 60%, and some people even say up to 80% during shedding. Now, what I do is I just make a humid hide. Super simple. I just have an overturned, I think they use these to drain oil, basically, right? I bought it at the dollar store, or a salad bowl, whatever, and I make sure that underneath that they have some sort of sphagnum moss or whatever, and I keep that humid. And the way I do that is just spray it all the time. Usually every 3 days is enough. Sometimes I come back in 5 days and it's still humid enough. And then the other section of, or the other end of the enclosure, they've got a hide there as well, but it's dry. So they have a choice. Not only can they be warm or cool, but they can be dry or they can be more humid. And my pythons actually all kind of use this, and I think it's worked really, really well, and I've had zero shedding issues since I've started doing this. So basically, in short, just the humidity and the heat requirement might be a little bit more than a beginner would be able to attain, and of course, it's just way, way easier to have things like corn snakes or hognose snakes or whatever. So not super difficult, but more difficult than what I would consider a beginner snake. And before we move on to number one, I'll let you know that at the end, we're gonna go over why they're freaking awesome. So don't think that I just hate ball pythons. I love them. I've got tons of them. But anyway, number one, they're picky eaters. And they're going to be picky eaters, especially if you don't have the parameters right, which is why I put that as number two. I think the biggest turnoff for most keepers is because they don't eat a lot of the time. And it's not just because you're doing something wrong. It could be that you're doing something wrong and making mistakes, but it could just be that it's a ball python. Don't go in my sleeve again, please. And ball pythons just sometimes don't eat. That's just part of the game with ball pythons, is they're just going to go on hunger strikes. And we're talking about sometimes like close to a year. So it's not one of those things where, get out of my sleeve. Well, now you're spending $5 every week or every 10 days or however often you try to feed it. And once you thaw out a rat, because that's what I always suggest, frozen thawed instead of live, and you're wiggling it around or whatever, you leave it there and they just don't eat it. They will not eat it no matter what you do. Well, that's $5 down the drain. You don't have any other animals to feed it to. You can't refreeze it. So you just have to throw it out. It's a loss of a life that never got eaten, and also it's a loss of $5. And let's suppose you do that for 10 weeks in a row, $50 down the toilet because little stinker won't freaking eat. And let's just touch on that live versus frozen thawed thing, because a lot of people say, well, ball pythons are better off on live. And sure, some will only eat live. I personally have been able to get every one of my snakes on frozen thawed, so it is something that you can do for sure, and I've done videos about it. I'll throw a card up in the top left here, or top right, or wherever it appears, so you can go and check it out. But I think that that is the main thing that people gripe about, is that they have to feed live in certain circumstances, and feeding live is just not a pleasurable thing for a lot of people to watch, so they don't want to do it. Anyway, what I'm trying to say is here, the temperature of the rat might need to be perfect. You might need to jumble it around perfect. Some snakes want you to just throw it in and walk away and turn off the lights and never come back for another week until it's time for feeding again, or they won't eat. It's just like so much work to get them to eat sometimes. This guy eats every time though. So those are your top three, why I think that they're kind of not perfect for beginners. So let's just go over why these things are freaking awesome pets. First of all, their size, which I know I said was a downside, but I think that if you're not intimidated by a snake that gets to 5 or 6 feet, 4 or 5 feet, I should say rather, especially if you get them as a baby, because here's the thing, if you get them as a baby, say like this size, this is like the size you'd get them at the smallest because it's been eating for several weeks, then it's going to grow, and when it grows, it's not going to seem like a big growth spurt to you because you'll see it every day. So it's kind of like your kids, right? You see your kid, you don't realize that they had a growth spurt of 4 inches because you see them every day. But if they go back to school after the summer, everyone, holy cow, you grew so much. I never actually had this. No one ever told me that I grew a lot over a summer. But I think you get what I'm trying to say here. It's just not like an overnight thing, which is why a lot of people say it's like you can get a berm if you want as a beginner because it's going to grow so slow. I don't recommend this, by the way, but regardless, the fact that they are the perfect size, I think this is the perfect size for me. This is a personal opinion though, right? There is no such thing as a perfect size, but for me, this is what I love the most. That's why I have so many ball pythons, and because they are big enough they can give you a hug, but it doesn't feel dangerous like something like, I don't know, a Burmese python. When they get to 10 feet, that hug can start to feel like, please don't kill me, pretty quick, you know? Second of 3 reasons why I think they're awesome is you can get them in basically any color or pattern. For example, this is a banana ball python. I think it's an absolutely beautiful animal. I love bananas. I have, well, I guess 5 of them now, right? Because 5 babies popped out and I haven't sold any yet. But I'm going to keep a couple of them. I'm going to sell some as well. I think they're beautiful. You can get them in like black and white, basically. You can get albinos. And even the regular ones look absolutely gorgeous, just the way they come in the wild. So, I mean, like, what's not to love about the way they look? And the last thing, they're docile. I'm staring at you. I'm not worrying about what this thing is doing. And unless they think you're food, it's very unlikely they're going to bite you. And if they do, they're going to let you know first. They're going to huff and puff, and they're going to act defensive. They're kind of easy to read most of the time. Now, don't get me wrong. Accidents happen. Freak things happen. So it's not like, I don't want to say it's your fault if you get bit, but a lot of the times it's your fault if you get bit. And I'm not going to lie. Getting bit by anything sucks. But a ball python, there's worse things to be getting bit by. Trust me. So there you go. 3 reasons why ball pythons are probably not good beginner pets, but they could be. I mean, as long as you do your due diligence and your research, you could definitely, as a novice, someone who's never had a pet before, have a ball python without issue at all. It's just that maybe not for everybody. And as always, thank you so much to the Patreon supporters. You guys knew about that cool clutch of eggs and actually the other clutch of ball pythons as well. You get to know extra stuff, discounts on the merch, more Patreon-only content coming soon, and your name gets up here as well. Thank you guys so much. For as little as $1 a month, you can be part of the team. And also, as always, thank you so much to Cages. Cages Custom Enclosures, if you want the best PVC that you could possibly have for your ball python, link in the description below. Code WWR at checkout gives you free door handles. And if you're wondering what to feed your ball python, don't feed them black soldier fly larvae. You can feed things like your bearded dragon or your leopard gecko that. These guys are an absolutely amazing company, shipped directly to your door if you live in the US, very quick. The price is absolutely amazing for what it is, like ridiculously good. My animals eat these guys and yours can too, and you can get 10% off using code WWR at checkout. That's it. Hit subscribe. See you on Thursday.